I feel like it's so important that our identity be in our faith and in
Yeah.
God than in our culture
Yeah.
or our families or our upbringing or our parents or
Yeah.
whatever, or even our kids if we have kids. Like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? It shouldn't
yeah.
be in anything that's a human form, to be
Yeah,
honest. Like,
right.
that's why I feel like when it comes to faith, it's like if my identity is in God, He's never going to leave me.
Yeah.
So to your
exactly.
point, I won't be shattered in that way because He's always there. That's
Yeah.
that unconditional love that a family cannot give you. They just can't.
Nope,
Let's keep it
nope.
real. They're going to disappoint you. They're going to hurt you. They're going to do all these things
sure
that,
are.
whether intentional or not, they are capable of doing it. God is not capable of that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like, He's
yeah.
capable of loving you, of protecting you, of covering you. You know what I mean? And all these things and doing miracles and all that. There's no human that can do that. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
So
yes,
because
ma'am.
of that, it's like I'd rather my identity be rooted in my faith and in God than in my culture, my friends, my family, or anybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Raw Faith Podcast. Back with me, I have my friend Stefanie for a second episode. I didn't scare her away.
Yes,
So,
nope, I'm back and
so we're
smiling.
here for a second episode. So today we're going to talk about cultural identity and faith and how that's kind of shaped our journey. So I guess we're just going to get right into it.
Yeah.
I think you guys already know Stefanie from the last episode, so we don't have to reintroduce her. But Stefanie, question for you
Yes.
is, can you share a time where your cultural identity has clashed with your faith beliefs?
So I feel like growing up Catholic Italian or Italian Catholic, I definitely had seeds of faith planted, but I definitely knew from an early age that you worked hard and you saved what you had. Um, my father especially modeled that. And so my brother, my sister, and I were taught that, you take care of yourself, you take care of your tight-knit family, your specific group, whether it's, your parents and or your spouse and your children. But that's where it stops. I was never encouraged or taught to give of what I have. So I think then, walking into a very Bible preaching church and opening the Bible and reading it and finding out that Jesus encourages those that follow him or those that ask him, like, what do I do, to be with you in eternity, or what do I do to um to be in heaven? And he says to sell everything and follow me. Sell everything, give it to the poor, and follow me. Now, like, upon looking into that, right, like, we had a conversation, and that's not necessarily what all followers of Jesus are asked to do by him. But this specific person, because his identity was so attached to his things,
Wealth, yeah.
right? He was specifically asked to do that. So it's not like, this is one of the things you have to do to follow Jesus, is to sell everything you have.
Yeah,
But
because if that was the case, no one would follow
exactly,
Jesus.
exactly.
They'd be like, nah, I'm good. I'll pass on that. I honestly don't know that I could do it. I'm being totally honest.
No, of course. I mean, it is extreme. That's extreme.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
For
And
sure.
so, but I think it's so funny, like, going on a small kind of a tangent,
Sure.
but there is one place in the Bible where Jesus does encourage. I might have to ask you to look this up for me.
Okay. It says the verse you're referring to is Matthew 5:30, where Jesus says, "And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell." Well, damn. The verse is part of a Sermon on the Mount and uses hyperbole language to emphasize the seriousness of avoiding sin.
So I guess where I was going with that is, like, Jesus calls people to extremes when it's necessary, right? Like, eh, so going back to selling every possession, right? Like, he's not calling all of us to do that. But if a weakness of yours is stealing, he's basically saying you're better off cutting your hand off.
Which is crazy.
Right. Like, because, he's basically saying, like, whatever it is that is your temptation,
Go to the
stay
extreme.
far, right. Go to the extreme,
To
stay
avoid
away
it.
from that
Mhm.
temptation as best you can if you have to
Right.
cut your hand off, right?
Right.
So like anyway, going back to the possessions, if your possessions are such an idol in your life,
Mhm.
then he's telling you, sell them all and follow me, give everything to the poor.
Mhm.
So going back to my culture, right? My
Mhm.
upbringing, like I it would be ludicrous to ever give 50 to $100 a week to my church. That
Mhm.
would be, if my father ever found out that that
Mhm.
was like a thought of mine, he would, I don't even know. Like, I can't even imagine.
Mhm.
He would probably just laugh like hysterically and
Uh.
just, yeah. So I mean, being an adult, right? Like I make my own decisions financially. I don't have to answer to anybody, and thankfully, I don't have to even share any of that with anyone.
Mhm.
Um, but it's funny how I think back and how it's so countercultural. Like what I'm asked to do with my money um is so countercultural, specifically in my culture.
Right.
Because I never was raised to think that. And so like why, if you think about it, like I don't know, it's kind of crazy. I listen, we live comfortably, right?
We
Like
do.
you and I both, we live very comfortably.
Thank you,
We
Jesus.
Yes, exactly. So could I give more? Certainly. I'll
Mhm.
I'll be the first one to say I have a surplus that I could definitely give. Um, should I? Listen, I not going to take it with me. None of us are. We
Mm.
are going to leave this earth with
Yeah.
not an ounce of what we have here. So, how
Yeah.
do you even like how do you figure out then what is right, what is not enough, what is too much?
Mhm.
Like, how do we navigate
So
that?
now are we talking about the area of tithing at this in
Yeah, and
this
I mean,
point?
not
Mhm.
even not even necessarily tithing. So there's so many different ways to donate. Like so many different ministries and
Mhm.
organizations that like only survive by donations.
Mhm.
So how do you really figure out what's enough, what's not enough? What,
That's a
you
good
know?
question. I think you just like anything, right? We know in our spirit. We'll know. If we're tuned in enough to God and we pray on it,
Yeah.
God will tell us, hey, what's enough? There's been times where, it's like end of the year and you have to give a certain amount. And I'm like, God, what's the number? Tell
Yeah.
me the number because I don't know. And
Yeah.
then a number will pop in and I'm like, damn, not that number. Like,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but I got to do it because God told me to. Like that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how I know
Have
what's
you
the right
done that?
number.
Is
I
that like,
have. I have.
wow.
I have. And I'm like, damn, not that number, God. But he said, that's the number. I'm like, all right, well. And then I had to do it. Obviously it's not a grand number because God knows my heart too. He's like, well, we're not gonna go crazy, Marley. Like, we get
Is
it.
that to your church you're talking
But
about or other like tithing
yeah, yeah,
wise?
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Tithing
okay.
wise, tithing wise.
Gotcha.
Well, the end of the year where you kind of got to give more and all
Mhm,
that stuff.
mhm,
So I'm
mhm.
just like, what's the number, God? Like, talk to me. What is it? And I pray about it. I always pray about it, right? And then the number will come up, and then I go with that number because I feel like if I don't, then I'm not obeying God,
Mhm,
right? So I
mhm.
think that's with anything. As I'm getting older and deeper into my faith, right? I'm just like, okay, I'm obeying God more because I'm hearing from God more.
Yeah.
So I think to answer your question in terms of how do you know what's the right number, or how do you know kind of what to do, since in your culture you're used to saving and hoarding, for lack of a
It
better word, that
is.
money and
It's
it being for
so
you,
yeah.
when you're like, well, how do I shift that cultural perspective of like saving versus like not spending or giving or whatever, but like pouring into and investing
Yeah.
into something else? Because that's how I like to look at it, right? It makes more sense to me in that way when I see it as an investment, right? We actually had a
Mhm.
sermon about that recently, about how to look at tithing, right? And how to look
Mhm.
at that as an investment. And I think we talked about
Yeah,
that
we
when we were
did.
doing
We
our little
did.
pilot, where we're just like, if you look at it as an investment, and if you look at anything that you do and anywhere you go,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like, technically going into church, they're pouring into us. So they're
Mhm.
feeding us, right? So like, how could we
Right.
not give to that? It's just like
Yeah.
buying a ticket to a concert. It's like it's the same thing but different, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how I see it now. It's just like, hey, if it wasn't pouring into me, yeah, I probably wouldn't give, but it
Sure.
does, and that's why I'm there. So I think that's how I justify it, and that's
Yeah.
how I changed my heart posture, because I think at the end of the day, it's a heart posture thing,
It
especially
totally
with
is.
money. Oh my
Yeah.
God, it's money is such a hard thing to kind of
Mm.
shift your mindset about, especially from
Mhm.
a cultural perspective if you've always seen it a certain way. For instance, for me, I was a penny pincher because I
Mhm.
didn't have a lot, like growing
Mhm.
up, it was just like, oh, we had to, so I was that hoarder. Man, let me tell you a quick story. Not to go on a
I love that.
tangent,
I love
but
side stories. Yes, share.
but I used to be that type of person. And I don't know if this is part of my OCD personality, but I used to write every single penny that I would spend. Every single penny that I would
When you were a kid?
when I was a kid. Now I don't do
So
that. I
before you had,
mean,
like, a checking account, before you
no, even when I had a checking account.
so, like, before that, though, you did it?
Before that and when I did, right? So I probably had a checking account at the same time because I started working, I was 14 and I had a checking account because that's where my money went
Uh-huh.
into.
But so even
But
before you started
but
working,
before that, right, if I
so
got
tell me
any
what
little
this
thing,
looked like.
just it was literally just a piece of paper and I would just write down every cent, even if it was a
That is
dollar.
adorable,
If I
first of
went to
all.
CVS, if I went to whatever it was, I would write everything down. And it would became such an obsessive thing, which is not good, and God probably does not like this, um but it became a thing, and then even when I got an account and I had a checking account, and when you had the little checkbook and then you get to write your
Mhm.
balance
Oh,
and all
yeah.
that, I would do all that, and I'm like, "Why aren't these numbers adding up?" Like, 'cause I was like
Oh.
I wasn't good with math, y'all, but but I
That's
became
great.
so obsessive because I'm like, "Hey, I don't have a lot, so how can I,
Huh.
make sure that I'm not
Overspending?
overspending or that I'm utilizing this well or whatever the case may be,
So
right?"
interesting.
So that became a habit for me, right? So even till this day I did it. I told you how much I spent on,
Yeah, yeah,
putting this
yeah.
all together kind of thing. And that was me going back into my childhood. Like, obviously now it's like an adult thing to do because you're
Of
balancing your
course.
budget and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, it's ingrained in me to do that, right?
Huh.
But when I give to God, I can't be like that. I
Right.
can't sit there and nitpick of all the money that I'm giving because that's not
Mhm.
giving from the right heart posture. It's
Yeah.
not saying, "Hey, I'm giving this to you," or "I'm even giving this to you first versus everything
Mhm.
else. I mean, now I have automatic, so it's just coming out automatically
Yeah,
every
yeah,
month,
yeah, yeah.
so I don't
Yeah.
think about it. So whether it's my first or not, like, I don't even know, it's probably not my first, but it's at the beginning of the month, so I don't know if that counts. But, um, but yeah, I don't know. I just feel like money in general, from a cultural perspective, has always been hard for, I think, everyone. If I'm
Yeah,
honest, for
yeah.
everyone, especially those who have struggled and have had to
Right.
penny pinch in that way. So I say that story just to say that, like, it's really hard to think about giving when you don't even have for yourself.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's where God wants you to give.
Mm,
And that's where you're blessed. And that is very hard. That is a very hard concept to
it is.
conceptualize
It is.
and to tell people to do.
Yeah.
My sister, the sister right before me, one of my sisters, I have 4, um, before she does that very well.
Hmm.
She doesn't have much, but she will give from her lack, which is
That's beautiful.
wild to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like although she might look at her life and say, "Hey, I'm not as blessed as you, and the third," I feel like God is still pleased with her
Mm.
because he's like, "You know what? You don't have much, but you have the right heart posture."
Yeah, so
That
true.
is huge. Whether she sees it that way, I don't know.
Right.
But I see it that way, and I don't know that I've ever told her
Yeah.
that, and she probably has never, heard me say that, but
Yeah.
that's
It
huge.
is. It really is. And I think the heart posture, like going back to that concept, it's also, it's also important to do so in private and not be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I give to and this person," because
Exactly.
even if you have little and you're giving more than, those that have a lot, if you're doing so to make sure everybody knows about it and you're advertising it, that's not the right heart posture, right? So
Yeah.
there is that. It's so interesting because when I think back to my childhood and even now, like my parents especially will say to me all the time, "Don't get me any gifts. I don't like save your money. Don't
Mm.
get me any gifts." So, do they really not want a gift for me? Or are they just trying to put this in my head of like, save your money, don't spend your money?
Right.
I don't know. It's so like, I grew up with just hearing
Mhm.
that all the time. Save your money. Don't
Mhm.
even buy me a gift. They'd rather me save my money. And
Which is like, "Thanks, parents." Like,
yeah, like,
but
yeah, thank you for teaching me that,
right.
but it also seeped into my like
Mhm.
now being like, "Oh, I shouldn't, I have to like I am it's like a hoarding mentality of I
Yeah.
can't like I've just got to keep it in this place and it's just going
Yeah.
to sit there
Yeah.
and not have a purpose,
Right.
I don't know. I
Mhm.
guess yeah, it's so crazy how
Mhm.
every one of us has a very different perspective because of our upbringing and
Yeah.
because of our personalities too,
Mhm.
like
What challenges have you faced in
challenges.
expressing your faith?
Yeah. So that's what I think it is like they're so different. And I think a big part of it is like honestly in my culture, there's a lot of like well, not in my culture, in my family. I should say
Okay.
in my family.
Fair,
But I
fair,
think
fair.
it's partially cultural too.
Mhm.
There's a lot of like kind of disrespectful um it's common in my culture for there to be a lot of aggressive kind of conversations happening,
Okay.
especially in my family.
Which make it
especially in
hard
my
to talk about faith or
no, I
oh.
think it's like I've recognized that that really isn't the way we should be talking to somebody who bears the image of
Ah,
God.
got it, got it.
And so I really had to kind of reprogram sometimes the way that I think and the way that I talk because I'm like, that's not, a- it's, I don't think that's what God wants for
Gotcha.
me to say or, I shouldn't be interacting with someone that way. And even it's just like my immediate family, kind of just talking down to the person
Mm,
or just in a very disrespectful kind of like sarcastic way. That's the
mhm,
discourse. That's what the word I'm looking for that I feel like we have a lot of. And I've had to kind of like that's a challenge for me because I know
okay.
that that's really not the way we should be talking to again an image bearer of God. Like
Mhm,
so that's yeah. I how does that look to me? I just yeah, like I've had to be more of an observer, I think, in
mm.
family situations.
Conversations,
Yeah,
okay. So would you say that because your family grew up a certain way and talking to each other a certain way, that it has changed the way that you feel like you can show up within your family because you
totally.
know that you're not supposed to be like that because it
Yes.
doesn't resemble
Yes.
God's character?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's
Gotcha.
hard because I mean, you are what you where you have
Surround.
been, right? Like
Mhm.
what you're surrounded by. So I find myself going back into those old patterns when I'm around my family a lot.
Mm,
And I can hear it in my voice. I'm like, oh, that was like, why did I say it that way? Or
mm.
I didn't mean it that way. And I have to like, I wish I kind of recorded myself and I could listen and be like, oh, I can't do it that next time.
So do you feel like you're constantly having to fight against your old you
100%.
versus the new you who you're
Yeah.
becoming and have been becoming?
Yeah.
And what does that look like for you to constantly challenge against that or be, up against that?
Mm, man. I think I've been really hard on myself
Mm,
in times where I kind of hear certain things and I'm like, ooh.
mm,
So I can be hard on myself. Um, but I think it's a good like it's a transformation that happened within me. And so if that transformation happens within you, it has to like there's fruits of that. And the
mhm,
fruits of that have to be in the way you treat people and the way you speak and
mhm.
really like in the way you think.
Yeah.
So it is hard. I think there's like a tug of war kind of in my spirit sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, but it's kind of crazy because I see it in my family, like just listening to them and I'm like, oh, I kind of cringe.
Yeah, that
Right?
part.
Have
Me
you like,
too.
do you experience that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, because you're constantly fighting against, like I said, your new self and your old self. Is just like I see my old self in them when I'm seeing them. And that's
Yes.
not to judge them, but it's
No.
just like I've worked so hard to get away from that and grow from that that when I see it, it's just like not disappointing, but it's just like a bit of both. It's kind of disappointing, but then also like a part of me is glad that, hey, I'm no longer there.
Mhm.
Again,
Mhm.
not to
Mhm.
judge them or feel like I'm better than them, but it's just like, hey, not I've made it out, but like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But it's just like, hey, I can
Mhm.
see the fruits of my labor when I see them. That sounds
Mm.
so bad.
No,
And
no,
I
no,
just said that
no,
out loud,
no.
but like it's ooh.
No,
But
but it's God's work in you. Like the
yeah.
Spirit's work in you. I mean
Yeah.
that like and you've come so far because of where you are. You can see that when you're
Yeah.
around them. It's I mean, it's real.
But here's the thing, right? To kind of go back to the topic of that cultural identity, right? I feel like, especially when it comes to my faith, right? I think, as you know, the types of churches that I've been to, none of them have been a Hispanic background church at all, right? The
Mm.
first one was an Asian church. The second one was a white
Immigrants.
church,
Yeah,
technically,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's different people that go there, but it's a white pastor, so I'm speaking from a pastoral perspective.
Mhm.
Second church, same thing, Asian church, but other people go, right? And then my church now, I mean, technically it's a black church, but the pastor's, Puerto Rican and black, but still,
Mm. Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
generally a black church.
Mhm.
Mainly the people that go there are black. But all that to say that I don't necessarily see this is bad because you shouldn't see yourself in people and community in that way, but like I don't see myself in the places that
Mm.
I'm in when it comes to my faith. And that's been hard because I'm like, well, if I don't see people that look like me in terms of my family
Mhm.
background or whatever, where I'm praising God, then does that mean that I either don't belong, don't relate, don't whatever the case may be? And I'm like, no, that's not the case either,
Yeah.
because there is a diversity there, but sometimes it makes it challenging for me to feel not even whole because that's not right, but like
Mm. Like a part of them?
something is I don't want to say something is missing because obviously, God is the thing, but like I don't know how to explain it. Like when I'm with my family, although I know they're they're a hot mess sometimes, I'm just
Mm.
like but this feels like home.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
bad to be like, oh, well, I'm at church and I don't know that it feels like home. Because
Mm.
that's not true. It's not accurate. But sometimes it can feel that way because I don't see the identity of my culture
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
in the church that I go to. So it's been
Yeah.
a struggle. Like, I think I told you the first church that I went to, all Asian.
Mhm.
One white guy, maybe one Dominican. They were both married to Asian people. And then me. Like, there was no identity there from a
Mm.
cultural perspective that I saw within my faith. So that made it hard to follow, I guess, not to follow God, but to see, hey, is this for me?
Mhm.
Is faith for me, or is it just for people that look like this?
Do you think that if it was like a Hispanic church, do you feel like that would?
No, because if I stepped into a Hispanic church, I'd be like, look at these, like, you know
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah.
I'm like,
But
because I
what
wouldn't
if it was
relate.
Dominican? Like, what
No,
if it
well,
was
that's the
just?
thing. If I
Mm.
went to a Dominican church, first of all, they're a whole fool because I've been to one before, and they're just, first of all, I don't understand them because all the Spanish. I speak Spanish,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like,
yeah.
you want me to no, it's not
No.
happening. Like, I don't know what you're saying, and they
Right.
talk so fast, so I'm just like, that's not for me. So that's to your point. It's just like it's
Mm.
not even about seeing the people that look like me in the church. It's something else
So
because
what
there's
is?
people like me that are not so Hispanic that go to church. Where are they? I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
I don't know. But anyway.
So what do you feel like? Why is that on your heart? Like, what do you think? Do you
Mm.
think there's a reason for that? That
I
God has?
think, great question. I
Yeah.
think in general, right? Not just at church, I think even at work. I think in different, even volunteer things that I do, or just anywhere that I place myself, I don't typically see people that look like me. So,
Mm.
from a cultural perspective and a cultural identity, I don't see people like me
Mm-hmm.
anywhere.
Really? Even in this
And that is
area?
hard. Yes.
Hmm.
Grant you, right now, like my neighbor is Hispanic, the neighbor down the street is Hispanic, the other one down there is Hispanic. That's all new. You know what I mean? Like before that, I mean, I live in a white town, but like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I just don't see a lot of me. So when I do, there are some people at the church that are, and when I do, I'm like, either I gravitate towards them or I bond with them differently because there's a level of knownness,
Mm-hmm.
if
Mm-hmm.
that makes any
No,
sense,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Knownness
yeah,
might
yeah.
not be the right word, but
No,
like
I know what you mean.
of like connectiveness where it's
Yeah,
just like
yeah, it's
we're
different.
both from the same background, even though
Yeah.
they might not be Dominican, they might be Puerto Rican or anything, something else, but it's just like, hey, we get it, you know? So yeah.
There's something about humans that, like, I think it's super important for us to feel known.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not near, or if if you're not surrounded by people that look like you and have had very similar experiences,
Hmm.
that you don't feel known. I think that that's a
Yeah.
really, really big thing. It's
Ab-
important.
Absolutely.
It's
Even at
important.
work, there
Yeah.
is nobody at my job that I work closely with that is Hispanic.
Hmm.
That is sad. All white, some
Yeah.
Asian, some black, some Indian,
Yeah.
Hispanic. You don't see
Would
it.
you say that your upbringing, I don't, this is like, I don't even know how to ask this, but do you feel like Hispanics have very similar experiences in their upbringings or in their families, right? Like their family units are similar, would you say?
That's a great question. I think it varies on the type of family. And that
Yeah.
sounds like, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but like, did they grow up with a bunch of their abuelas and you know what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah.
Or were they just like just them versus
Yeah.
like, with generations? Like for us,
Yeah.
it was just the generations. Like my grandmother, she lived in DR, so she wasn't like in our household,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
obviously we knew her, all that stuff. But all the aunts and all that stuff. Like we didn't grow up that way. People that grow up that
Mhm.
way, they have a different level of family or family, whatever the word,
Familial.
familial, whatever the
Yeah,
word is,
yeah. That's it.
connection
Mhm.
than we do. And maybe that's why I don't feel so deep rooted in my culture because we didn't grow up that
Mm.
way. I was whitewashed as hell. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was your whitest of white
So that makes
Dominican.
sense because you're like, you look Dominican, which
Do I feel like I
actually
look a little
you
white
don't
girl?
really.
Like,
Yeah. You don't really. So that's the thing is too, is that there's such a uniqueness about you
mm,
that it's like you
mm,
look around, you're like, well, there's really not a lot of people
right.
that I can connect to in the way that I was raised, the way I look. the way I talk,
That
like, it
part.
makes sense.
That
It
part.
does.
And that's the thing. It's just like I may have maybe let's say I looked white or whatever, but then I hung out with a bunch of black people. Like culturally, like I
Mhm.
grew up around black people. Like my
Yeah.
town was a melting pot. There were Hispanics there, obviously in my town there were. But then there were also a lot of black people, but then there were some white people and then there were
Mhm.
some Indians. So it was a melting pot. So I will say
Mm.
that growing up, that was the most diversity that I've probably to this day experienced in my life, which I appreciate. I appreciate that.
Mhm, mhm.
But I don't see that elsewhere, like in the
Yeah,
workplace
yeah.
or at church or you know what I mean? Like I just don't. And I don't know if that means anything or if that says anything, but
Mm.
I guess I'm used to that, so I crave that. Because
Yeah.
it was how I was raised, I do crave it, but I have yet to find it in the way that
Right.
I had it growing up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's good or bad. It's just what it is.
Right, right. I just thinking back about my childhood and like whether or not I experienced what you are talking about and even like into my adulthood. And I feel like I did because my my school experience, I went to Catholic school and I had this tiny class, like literally 20 kids was like the biggest my class was. And those kids
Mm,
followed me from kindergarten to 8th grade
mm,
because it was a small little school. I
mm.
graduated with 12 other kids besides myself from 8th grade. So
Oh,
I followed, like those kids followed me. We were together all
mm,
the time.
wow.
And so that was my circle. I didn't play sports. Wasn't involved in anything else. It was them. And even so, even if I think if it was a bigger group than that, my parents are both like my dad didn't go to high school. My mom did, but didn't go to college. So like
Mhm,
their education level was limited. And I was very, very secluded and like I wasn't allowed to sleep at friends' houses. Like
mm,
so and I mean culturally, like were we very culturally Italian? Not really, because my mom was born here. My dad wasn't, but I definitely was raised very differently than the kids that were around me.
mhm,
So like I'm trying to see if I can associate it all. And even like
mhm.
as I grew up, I mean, in my 20s and my 30s, my best friend who you met is Venezuelan. And like her family is really very you know, uh, tied to their culture.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time with her and it's interesting because I feel like it was hard for me to relate because like culturally we're very different. I mean, we're
Mm,
very like love being around family and eating and all that kind of stuff, but
mhm,
there's a lot of differences between the Italian culture, I think, and Hispanic culture. So, that was definitely kind of a struggle for me. And I feel like I identity is such an important thing. Like if we don't if our identity is not like rooted, we can really feel kind of alone
mhm.
and like sort of lost, you
But that's
know?
such a great point, right? Because when it comes to the faith, someone would
Yeah.
potentially say, I mean, I'm saying it now, that should our identity be rooted in our culture
Right.
or in God?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Because technically the topic is about that. Are we saying that our culture is what we identify with, or should
Mhm.
our faith be what we
Right,
identify
right.
with? And how do we navigate the two? Because technically
Mhm.
they are different. You
Yeah,
know what I'm saying?
totally.
So culturally, do I identify with my culture? I got to say I don't.
Mm.
And that sucks. But at the same time, it's a good thing because I know that I can pour more into identifying with my faith and still be able to identify with the masses and more people
Amen.
than
Mhm.
just my culture, right?
Mhm.
Because I feel like, again, I've been to so many different churches. I didn't necessarily feel like a stranger or like
Mhm.
I didn't belong. I mean, sometimes I felt like an outcast in those
Yeah.
environments. I mean, let's be
Aw.
real. However, I was still able to assimilate and still be able to be a part of those cultures, even though that wasn't my culture.
Yeah.
But from a faith perspective, I was accepted.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And
Amen.
that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's community.
So,
That's
like and that's community, right? And it was
yeah.
kind of, talking about that in
Yeah.
terms of, like,
You
our
hit it.
community. Our identity in our community versus identity in our culture.
Mhm.
My experience, I've been able to identify more with my community and whatever
Yeah.
community that I've been a part of
And
because
I've seen it. You have.
right? Right? Especially with, the community that we were kind of where we met and
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
that community was very different and
Diverse.
diverse
Yeah, yeah.
within itself, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Would the average Hispanic feel comfortable in those different types of environments? I don't think
No,
so.
no.
So, I was talking kind of a tangent, but I'll wrap up soon. Like,
No,
I
it's
was
great.
talking with
It's great.
my therapist once about that, and she was saying, "Well, look at the silver lining. Look at the fact that you were able to fit in to these different environments and still
Mhm.
coexist versus
Mhm.
feeling like you don't belong." I didn't
Yes.
feel like I didn't belong in those places. Like, I did feel like I belonged, but still there was something deep down in my spirit that was saying, "Yeah, but where like
Yeah. Yeah,
looks
yeah.
wise or culture wise do you like where are you there?" I
Mhm.
wasn't there,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
And sometimes that hits your spirit.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you sit there and you dwell there and you like, "Oh, I don't
Yes.
belong?" No.
Oh, that's the key. That's the key.
Yeah.
And I think those that do dwell on that are the people that become really lonely, and they wind up drifting,
Yeah.
especially from the church, right? And
Mhm.
or any community where they don't see themselves. But if that's the point, then you know, you're never really going to feel like 100% connected,
Yeah.
right? Because there's always going to be differences between you and the people
Mhm.
around that you're
Yep.
trying to associate with. But yeah, I mean, ultimately it's a body of believers that
That part.
to find and to
Mhm.
really like it's beautiful. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing better. That's why I think COVID was so difficult for us when we were unable to be around the
Mhm.
people that we needed to be around.
Mhm.
Man, it was not easy. And that's why, right? Because we feel like part of our identity was kind of torn from us.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to share, and then I don't know if you have anything
Yeah.
else that you wanted to bring up,
Mhm.
but when as we were talking, it made me think of the saying that I feel like I see so much. Family is everything. Like so
Oh,
many people will
I
say
hate
that.
that. I hate
I
that
know.
saying.
And I really every time I see that, I'm like, I know that the person's heart is in the right place when they say that and they have, good intentions. But it's really not, And if you're
The
like
family you build might be,
right,
but
right,
which can be
exactly.
coming from anywhere, but
Right, right. And I mean, I guess whenever the word everything is tied to
mm,
anything that's earthly, it's
right.
like,
The absolute of something.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
disappoint you. Like I mean, unfortunately, I have a family rift right now, and so if my
Yeah.
everything was tied to my family,
And you'd be
it would have been
shattered.
catastrophic.
Mhm.
Yeah, like it can't be that. I mean, unless it's your eternal, you know. Reality, like
Mhm.
we know what our eternal reality is and in our faith, like
Yeah.
that's where I could put my everything. But anything that's like temporal, that's here on earth, it's like no, it can't be everything.
It
So
can't.
and that is where a lot of our identity comes from. It's a lot of where it's common for people to get a lot of their identity from their family.
And that's why I feel like it's so important that our identity be in our faith and in
Yeah.
God than in our culture or our
Yeah.
families or our upbringing or our parents or
Yeah.
whatever, or even our kids if we have kids. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It shouldn't
Yeah.
be in anything that's a human one, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like,
Right.
that's why I feel like when it comes to faith, it's like if my identity is in God, He's never going to leave me.
Yeah,
So to your
exactly.
point, I won't be shattered in that way because He's always there. That's that
Yeah.
unconditional love that a family cannot give you. They just
Mhm.
can't. Let's
Nope,
keep it
nope.
real. They're going to disappoint you. They're going to hurt you. They're going to do all these
They
things
sure
that,
are.
whether intentional or not, they are capable of doing it.
Mhm.
God is not capable of that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like He's
yeah.
capable of loving you, of protecting you, of covering you. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And all these things and doing miracles and all that. There's no human that can do that.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
So
yes,
because
ma'am.
of that, it's like I'd rather my faith be my identity be rooted in my faith and in
Mhm.
God
Mhm.
than in my culture, my friends, my family, or anybody. Like
Yeah, yeah. There's so much peace in that too, because
there
it's like, oh,
is.
that's eternal. That's rock solid foundation.
Yeah.
That's where I want to spend
Yeah.
my time pouring my, like putting my identity in, putting all my stock in that. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I think that's where things can get really difficult, I think, for
Mhm.
people if is when things are so tied to that culture and so tied to human,
Mhm.
ideas. It's like it's just yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you said that. They're gonna
Mhm.
disappoint.
They
It's
are.
not forever.
They are.
Yeah.
So, in wrapping up this conversation, I think,
Yeah.
what is something that we can leave people with that are saying,
Mm.
hey, I want to be able to have God as my identity, but I'm not there yet. I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
to get there. I'm so tied to my family and what they
Yeah.
bring and what they provide for me. How do they, not saying detach or dissociate or whatever the case may be, but how do they pivot, shift, or transform to make sure that God is Number one, family is still there, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
saying get rid of your
totally.
family, don't love your family. We're not saying that, but it's more
Mhm.
so like let God be your first and foremost thing on that list in terms of what you look
Mm.
to and how you view yourself, right? And then go from there, right? There's going to be lists and all that stuff, right? But how do we encourage people to say, hey, turn to God instead of all these other
Mhm.
things if they're not close to God or don't know who God is?
Yeah,
What's one
yeah.
encouraging thing you can leave
Well,
people with?
I guess it's definitely a process. Like, it's
Hmm.
not gonna be an overnight thing, especially if you like, families are so close, so
Rooted,
it's
yeah.
so yeah, and I think it's a process. If you realize that there's maybe dysfunction in the way that your
Mm.
family is like overly involved in each other's lives and are,
Hmm.
I guess concerned with like making sure everybody is okay and healthy and taken care of and safe and all of that. I mean, and all of that is so important. I mean,
It
I
is.
care about my
Yeah.
family and will do anything for them, and I see them often and spend lots of time and invest all that in them. But I think it's to answer your question.
Mhm.
um for someone who's like, wow, I want to be there. I hear what you're saying, Marlene and Stephanie, and I do want my identity to be in God. It
Mhm.
is a process, and I feel like it starts with being around like-minded people. I'll say
Yeah.
that forever and ever. Being around like-minded people that can encourage you, that want what's best for you, and really just like, why? Like, why is that important? Open
Yeah.
up the Bible and a little bit at a time chisel that thing away.
Yeah.
I forget who it was that said this, but somebody said, I have to look it up. Something about like it's not for someone that's chiseling away at a rock.
Mhm.
It's not until like the 100th chisel that actually makes the first break, but it was
Mm.
all of those
Small
hits,
little, yeah,
those
yeah.
yeah, that actually led to that 100th chisel that actually took the first chunk off.
Mhm.
And so it's a process, and you have to really, the most one of the most important things I can say is have grace for yourself.
Yeah.
Because when like I said, I find myself kind of falling back into patterns or speaking the way that my family does. I mean, not that that is the same as like rooting your identity in them, but when you've been in those patterns for such a long time, it takes a while to break them.
Yeah.
And to just have grace and patience with yourself in that. And it really it takes time, but it also takes intentional time.
Yeah.
And I really believe that, surrounding yourself with people that understand that and can encourage you and root you on and know what you mean. And aren't like confused by it and just kind of like, ah, no, it's not that important. No, you have
Right.
to, if you feel it's important, surround yourself with people who feel it's important as well, and they'll encourage you.
Yeah.
It'll happen 100%. It will if you take it seriously, and if you just, you know, it's a process one day at a time.
Yeah. I
What do
would
you
say
say?
the same. I would say that in order to make that pivot and that change and that transformation to making sure that have God as your identity and
Mm,
not, your culture, I would say just be curious. Start there.
mm,
Start with the curiosity of wanting something different,
yeah.
wanting something more, and then not being afraid to put yourself in uncomfortable situations that allow you to explore what that faith looks like.
Yes.
Because I know I had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started going to church for myself, right, was 11 years ago, and I don't know if I think I've mentioned to you like the journey, right? I just Googled local modern church, and the church that was
Love
closest to me
that.
was an Asian church, and it was uncomfortable, but I went. I called them. I said, "Hey,
Mm,
is this church open to everyone?" And they're like, "Yeah, come on." And then I went, and they were so welcoming.
wow.
And
Love
but I
that.
had to put myself in that uncomfortable situation
Mm-hmm.
in order to seek and be curious and to
Mm-hmm.
explore,
Mm-hmm.
So I did that and I positioned myself in that way, and I was there for 4 years, and it built my foundation of what faith was, and I was able to grow from there. And I
Mm.
was able to then pivot to the next church and have a different part of my journey, you know what I mean, come about, and then the next church, and then now my fourth church, right? So, umpteen years later, like I'm
Yeah,
like
yeah,
church
yeah.
hopper. No, like every 4 years, I
So
feel
much
like I
growth though.
change to
Yeah.
different churches, but for a reason, right? Because of that growth, right?
Right.
So I will leave you with that. Is just start somewhere and see where you go, where you grow and where you go, right? And don't be afraid
Mhm.
to pivot, to change, to explore, and to not feel
Mhm.
stuck in one particular place if that place doesn't suit you anymore
Mm.
because your journey has expanded or grown. It's okay
Yeah, yeah.
to continue to navigate and move and meet new people, and you learn from people's experiences and what they've gone through, and that is hopefully what's going to help you draw nearer to God. Um Instead of just sticking with what you know, right?
Yeah,
Like, and it
yes.
being, "Oh, my family, that's everything." It's like, they're part of it, and you
Yeah.
want to be able to bring them along that journey with you. Don't leave them behind. Don't say, "Hey,
Yes.
I know God and I'm better than
It's the
you." That's not the
truth.
point. That's not the
Yeah.
message. The message is bring them with you, right?
Yeah.
Let them know that there's something greater than just this unit, right?
Mhm.
There's a bigger family to be a part of too,
Yeah.
right? That faith community, right? So that's our suggestion of like where
Yeah.
you can start, and hopefully that'll help you all. So y'all, I always say y'all like I'm Southern. I don't know why that comes out, but it does.
It's better than
So
use guys. Don't
use
say use
guys. Yeah, no, I
guys.
wouldn't say
No,
use.
no.
I don't know
No, no.
where's that come from.
It's so Jersey. I can't.
So I think I'll pray us out, and then
Yeah,
we're good to
thank you.
go. We're good. All right, Father God, we thank you. We thank you that you've allowed us to have this discussion, talk
Mhm.
about the things that people may not know how to talk about, God. Talking about our culture and how we were raised and are brought up, and leaving some of those things behind, and changing and shifting, and making sure that we rely on you and that you're at the center of our lives, God. It's
Mhm.
hard. It's not easy to make that shift and to get to know you, but I pray that whoever's watching this is able to draw nearer to you, is able to get to know who you are by the things that we talk about, by our experiences, by chipping away at the different things that we've done to get to where we are. Not
Mhm.
to say that we're perfect, not to say that we've got it all figured out. But God, I just pray that you just plant that seed of faith in their hearts, God, that you allow them to understand what it means to follow you, to love you, to seek you, God. And I pray that
Yes.
they allow your message to be at the center of all of the things that we talk about, God.
Mhm.
That it's
Mhm.
not about our opinions, it's not about necessarily even our experiences, but at the end of the day, that they see you through all of this, God.
Amen.
So I thank you, God, that you've allowed us this platform to have these conversations, to reach people that need to reach you and that you need to reach, God. So I
Mhm.
thank you. I love you. I need you in my life. I pray all of these things in your precious, mighty name. Amen, amen, and amen.
Amen. Thanks, Marlene.
Okay, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here for another
Yeah,
episode.
anytime.
Appreciate
I love
you.
it.
And I appreciate you all for watching, and
Mhm.
we will see you on the next episode.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.